You won't believe what happened in my garden last summer. Honestly, sometimes life surprises you in the most unexpected ways, and at 60 years old, I thought I'd seen just about everything. But that day, oh that day, proved me wrong. Before I start, tell me where you're watching from. I love hearing all the different cities and states. It makes me feel like we're all sitting on the same porch together, sharing a story over sweet tea. And if you enjoy little slices of real life like this, don't forget to tap that subscribe button and give the video a like. It helps more than you know, and it makes me feel like I've got friends all across the country listening in. Now let me take you back to that morning. The sun had barely climbed above the maple trees when I stepped out into my backyard. I live just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, where the mornings smell of wet soil and honeysuckle, and the air has that quiet kind of warmth that makes you linger a little longer before starting the day. My little garden has always been my refuge. It's where I go when the house feels too quiet, when I miss the sound of my husband's laughter echoing through the kitchen. He's been gone for 5 years now, and though I've learned to find peace in the stillness, sometimes it still aches. That morning, I was wrestling with a stubborn patch of weeds along the fence. My back was already starting to complain, and I remember thinking maybe I should finally hire someone to help me with the heavier work. That's when I heard the screen door creak open and a cheerful voice call out, "Hey, Mrs. Carter. My name's Jake, Sam's friend. He said you might need a hand." I turned around and saw him standing there, tall and smiling, with a kind of easy confidence you only see in young people. Jake was my grandson's friend from college, here for the summer break. Sam had mentioned him once or twice, said he was studying landscaping and looking for summer work. I didn't expect him to actually show up. "Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" I said, brushing the dirt from my gloves. "You really want to spend your morning helping an old lady dig in the dirt?" Jake laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that made me smile despite myself. "Ma'am, I grew up on a farm. This is nothing." And just like that, he was beside me, kneeling in the soil, sleeves rolled up. I tried to protest at first, told him I couldn't pay much, that I only needed help now and then. But he waved me off and said, "Don't worry about it. Sam told me you make the best lemonade in town. I'll work for that." The next few hours passed in easy conversation. He asked me about the plants, about the neighborhood, even about my husband. There was no awkwardness, just a quiet understanding between us. Every now and then, he'd stop to listen, really listen, in a way that most people don't anymore. It caught me off guard. The sun climbed higher, and we took a break under the old oak tree. I poured lemonade into 2 chipped glasses, and we sat side by side on the garden bench. The way the light filtered through the leaves made everything glow. His hair, the yellow of the drink, the faint shimmer of dust in the air. "You know," I said, looking out at the rows of tomatoes and zinnias, "I used to work out here with my husband every weekend. We didn't have much, but we made this garden together. It feels like he's still here sometimes." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "That's beautiful," he said. "My grandma was the same way about her garden. Said every flower had a memory." His words struck me. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it, soft and sincere, like he understood exactly what I meant. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was reminiscing to fill the silence. I felt connected. When he stood to pack up the tools, I caught myself studying him, not the way a woman looks at a man, but the way you notice someone who reminds you what warmth feels like. There was kindness in his face, and a certain steadiness in the way he moved. It stirred something in me I hadn't felt in years. Not romance, not exactly, but a sense of being seen, valued, even admired in a quiet, respectful way. As he headed toward the gate, he turned back and said, "I can come by again tomorrow if you'd like. "You've got a lot of work left to do out here, Mrs. Carter." I laughed. "Only if you promise not to call me Mrs. Carter. Makes me sound ancient." He grinned. "Deal then. What should I call you?" "Elaine," I said. "Just Elaine." "All right, Elaine. See you tomorrow." When he left, the yard felt strangely alive, like the air itself was humming. I stood there for a while, watching the path where he'd walked out, the sunlight flickering through the leaves. It wasn't love, not even close. It was something gentler, something that reminded me life still had surprises waiting for me. That night, as I watered the last of the marigolds, I caught myself smiling for no reason. Maybe it was just nice to have company again, or maybe it was the way he treated me, not as someone's grandmother, not as a woman past her prime, but simply as a person worth listening to. I didn't know then that this small act of kindness, one afternoon of shared work and easy conversation, was only the beginning. Tomorrow he'd come back, and the rhythm of our days would start to change in ways I could never have predicted. But for now, all I knew was the soft scent of earth and lemons, and the quiet thrill of feeling a spark of life again, right there in my own backyard. True to his word, Jake came back the next morning. I was already out in the garden, pruning the roses, when I saw him walking up the driveway with a small wooden box tucked under his arm. The morning sun caught the edge of his hair, and I couldn't help but smile. "Well, you're early," I said, trying not to sound as pleased as I felt. He grinned and lifted the box. "Brought you something. My granda used to make planters like these. Thought we could build a few for your herbs." There was something so thoughtful about that gesture. Most people my age would tell you it's rare for young folks to do anything without being asked, but Jake was different. He had this old-fashioned sincerity that made you want to trust him. We set to work, side by side again. He showed me how to line the wooden frames with mesh, how to fill them with the right blend of soil and compost. His hands were strong but gentle, careful with the tender seedlings I'd been nurturing since March. As we worked, our conversation drifted easily, like a gentle stream. He told me about his studies, about growing up in Tennessee, and about how his parents divorced when he was 10. He said his grandmother had raised him, and I could tell she'd done a good job. "She sounds like a strong woman," I said, pressing down the soil. He smiled softly. "She was. She passed last year. I think about her every time I'm in a garden." Something inside me ached for him then, not pity, but understanding. Loss has a way of finding its echo in another person's heart. I reached out and touched his arm lightly. "I'm sure she'd be proud of you, Jake." He met my eyes, and for a second, the world felt very still. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Two people recognizing a shared ache, and somehow easing it for each other. We spent the rest of the morning building the planters, laughter mixing with the steady rhythm of our work. The scent of damp soil and rosemary filled the air, and every so often, a breeze would carry the sound of the church bells from down the street. Around noon, I invited him inside for lunch. My house is modest, just a single story with pale blue shutters and a kitchen that still holds the warmth of family gatherings long gone. I made us grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, the kind of simple comfort food that never loses its charm. "You cook like my grandma," he said between bites, smiling. "Simple, but it tastes like home." I chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." After lunch, he offered to fix the loose gate latch by the back fence. I watched from the porch as he worked, focused, patient, whistling quietly to himself. The sight stirred something gentle inside me. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense, but more like admiration mixed with gratitude. In him I saw what I'd always valued in people: kindness, respect, and a willingness to give without expecting anything back. When he finished, he turned and waved, a streak of sweat across his brow. "Good as new," he said proudly. "Looks better than before," I replied. "You've got a real knack for this." He shrugged. Guess I just like fixing things. Feels good to make something right again. Those words lingered in my mind long after he left that afternoon. I stood there on the porch, looking at the mended gate and the new planters, and I realized he hadn't just been helping me with the garden. He was helping me rebuild something in myself, a sense of purpose, maybe even a little spark of joy I hadn't felt in years. The next few weeks became a rhythm. He'd stop by every few days, always with a new idea, planting a row of lavender, repairing the bird bath, building a trellis for the cucumbers. Sometimes we'd talk for hours. Other times we'd just work quietly side by side. There was one afternoon in particular I'll never forget. The sky had turned gray with an approaching storm, and the air was heavy with that sweet metallic scent that comes before rain. We were trying to cover the tomato plants before the weather turned, and I stumbled slightly in the mud. Jake caught my arm just in time, steadying me. "Careful, Elaine," he said gently. "Don't want you hurting yourself." I laughed, embarrassed. "Guess I'm not as steady as I used to be." He smiled. "You're doing just fine. You've got more energy than most people half your age." That simple comment, so casually said, warmed me in a way I didn't expect. I realized how rare it was to feel genuinely seen, not for my age or my past, but for who I still was. When the rain finally came, we ran for the porch, laughing like children. The thunder rolled across the hills, and we stood there, soaked to the bone but grinning like fools. The world felt alive again, vibrant and unpredictable. He turned to me, his voice softer now. "You know, Elaine, I think I've learned more here than in any of my classes this year." "Oh," I asked, half teasing. "And what exactly have you learned in my little garden?" He looked out at the rain. "That growth takes time. That care matters. And that sometimes the people who seem to be helping you are the ones being helped the most." I didn't know what to say to that. My throat tightened, and for a long moment, we just listened to the sound of rain on the tin roof. When he finally left that evening, the garden smelled fresh and new, like the world had been washed clean. I stood there long after he was gone, my heart full in a way I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't love, not exactly, but it was something precious. Maybe the garden wasn't the only thing growing that summer. Maybe I was too. By the time July came around, the garden had transformed. The zinnias were blazing in every color you could imagine. The tomatoes hung heavy on their vines, and even the shy little lavender plants had begun to bloom. Every corner of the yard felt alive again, and somehow I did too. Jake had become a regular part of my days. Sometimes he'd show up with fresh mulch or a new idea for the garden. Other times he'd just stop by to chat. I'd make us iced tea, and we'd sit under the oak tree talking about everything and nothing. It felt natural, easy, like we'd known each other much longer than just a few weeks. One afternoon, we decided to repaint the old garden shed. The sun was high, and the smell of paint mixed with the sweetness of honeysuckle from the fence line. I wore my old gardening hat, the one with the faded blue ribbon, and he teased me that I looked like a movie star from the 1960s. "Oh, you're just saying that because you want me to keep bringing you lemonade," I laughed. He smiled. "No, ma'am. I'm saying it because it's true." His words caught me off guard, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. There wasn't any flattery in his tone, no hint of mockery or playfulness, just genuine kindness. It reminded me how long it had been since anyone had noticed me like that, even in the smallest way. As we painted, he asked me about my life before Ash Eagle, about my teaching days, the years when my husband and I traveled, the dreams I once had and quietly tucked away. Talking to him felt freeing, as if the years between us didn't matter at all. When I asked about his own dreams, he said, "I think I just want to do something that makes things better. I like working with my hands, helping things grow. Maybe open a small landscaping business one day. You'll do well, I told him. You've got the heart for it. He looked at me and said softly, You really think so? I know so. There was something so innocent about the moment, yet it carried a quiet weight. I saw in him the same hope I'd had when I was younger, that longing to make a mark, to live a life that meant something. Later that week, he came by to help me move some heavy pots. My back had been acting up again, and though I tried to hide it, he noticed right away. Elaine, he said, setting the shovel down, you've done enough for today. Sit down before you hurt yourself. I protested, but he was insistent. He pulled over the old wicker chair, helped me sit, and then brought me a glass of cold water. There was something deeply respectful about the way he did it, not patronizing, just quietly caring. You remind me of my grandmother, he said after a while, smiling. She never stopped, always had to be doing something, even when we told her to rest. She sounds stubborn, I said, smiling back. She was, he said, but she also had this way of making you feel like being around her mattered. You have that too. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Compliments at my age feel different. They're not about vanity anymore. They touch something deeper, something you forget about until someone brings it back to life. That evening after he left, I sat in the garden as the sun dipped low and the fireflies began to flicker. The air was soft and golden, and I thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought Jake into my life. He was my grandson's friend, someone decades younger, yet somehow he brought me comfort and joy in ways I hadn't expected. I wasn't lonely anymore, but it was more than that. I felt alive, curious, open. The next day, Jake brought a small radio and set it on the porch rail. Every good garden needs music, he said. He tuned it to an oldie station, and soon the sound of soft guitar and harmonies filled the air. Without thinking, I hummed along. You know this one? He asked. Of course I do, I said, laughing. That's the Everly Brothers. My husband and I used to dance to this song in the kitchen. Jake smiled. Then you should dance now. Oh, I don't think so, I said quickly, waving him off. But he didn't move away. Instead, he offered his hand. Come on, Elaine, just a few steps, for old time's sake. I hesitated, but there was something in his face, kindness, encouragement, that made me take his hand. We stood there, on the worn boards of my porch, swaying gently to the music. It wasn't romantic. It was tender, human, a moment that existed purely for the joy of it. When the song ended, we both laughed softly, a little embarrassed but grateful all the same. The silence that followed felt peaceful, full. As the summer days passed, our bond deepened. We talked about everything. Regrets, dreams, the strange way time seems to speed up as you get older. He told me about feeling lost in the world sometimes, unsure where he belonged. I told him that never really changes, no matter your age. We were two people at different stages of life, meeting in the middle for a while. And in that middle ground, something beautiful took root, trust, understanding, and a quiet affection that neither of us needed to name. One afternoon, near the end of July, he told me he'd be heading back to college soon. The words hit me harder than I expected. I smiled and said all the right things. How proud I was of him, how he'd do great things. But when he left that evening, the garden felt strangely empty again. The wind moved through the lavender, carrying the faintest scent of rain and earth, and I realized that somewhere between the planting and the laughter and the quiet talks under the oak tree, I had learned to let my heart open again. Not to fall in love, but to feel alive, to welcome connection and change. Jake had come into my life like a season, unexpected, warm, and full of growth. And though I knew it couldn't last forever, I also knew the garden, and I would never be quite the same again. The morning Jake left for college, the sky was still a soft gray, and the garden shimmered with dew. I'd baked a batch of blueberry muffins the night before, the kind with sugar sprinkled on top, so they crackle a little when you bite into them. I wrapped a few in a paper bag for him, along with a small jar of honey from the local market. He arrived early as always, his truck rumbling up the driveway with that familiar sound I'd grown used to over the summer. When he stepped out, I noticed he'd trimmed his hair and packed his tools neatly in the back. There was a look in his eyes, that mixture of excitement and nervousness that comes before a new beginning. "Well," I said, handing him the bag, "you'll need something for the road." He smiled, taking it carefully. "You really didn't have to, Elaine." "I know," I said, "but I wanted to." We stood there for a while, not quite sure what to say. The garden around us seemed to hum quietly, the bees already busy in the zinnias, the air carrying the faint scent of mint and morning rain. It was as if the whole place was holding its breath. "I wanted to thank you," he said finally, "for everything. This place, it helped me more than you know." I shook my head. "If anything, I should be thanking you, Jake. You gave me something I didn't even know I'd lost." He tilted his head slightly. "What's that?" "Hope," I said, "and a reminder that life doesn't stop growing, no matter how old we get." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he stepped forward and gave me a hug, gentle, warm, and full of unspoken things. I closed my eyes and let myself feel the comfort of it, knowing it wasn't an ending, but a turning of pages. When he finally pulled away, I smiled and said, "You'd better get going before I find an excuse to make you stay and weed the whole yard again." He laughed. "Can't have that, but I'll be back to visit. You still owe me a lesson on how to make that lemonade." "You've got a deal," I said. I watched as he climbed into his truck, waved one last time, and disappeared down the winding road. The sound of the engine faded, and all that was left was the quiet rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the morning. For a long time I stood there, taking in the sight of the garden we'd built together. Every flower, every board of the new trellis, every brushstroke of paint on the shed felt like a memory etched into the soil. The garden was alive, thriving, and so was I. Over the weeks that followed, I settled back into my routine, though it wasn't quite the same. The days felt softer somehow, touched by a quiet gratitude. I spent more time sitting on the porch, watching the light shift through the trees, listening to the birds that had made a home in the new birdhouse Jake had built. Sometimes I'd catch myself talking out loud to the plants, or maybe to him in a way. "You'd like how the tomatoes turned out," I'd say, or "the lavender's really taken off." It made me smile, how natural it felt to keep that connection alive through the small things we'd shared. In late August, a letter arrived. It was from Jake, handwritten, in that neat, careful script of his. He told me about his classes, about how he joined a local community garden near campus, and how he'd used some of the techniques we tried together. At the bottom of the page, he wrote, "Thank you for reminding me that life's best lessons don't always come from books. You taught me that patience and care can grow more than plants. They can grow people too." I must have read that line a dozen times before folding the letter and setting it in my desk drawer. It warmed me to know that our summer hadn't just changed me. It had left a mark on him too. As autumn rolled in, the garden began to fade into its quiet season. The colors softened, the air turned crisp, and the world seemed to slow down. But even as the flowers wilted and the leaves began to fall, I felt something blooming inside me, something steady, content, and alive. I realized that the garden wasn't just a place anymore. It was a story. A living, breathing reminder that connection can come from the most unexpected places, that it's never too late to feel joy, to share kindness, to grow. Sometimes, when the sun sets just right and the light filters through the branches, I can almost hear his laughter again, carried on the breeze. And I smile, not with sadness, but with the quiet peace of knowing that everything and everyone that touches our lives leaves something beautiful behind. So if you're watching this right now, wherever you are, maybe in Ohio or Texas or way out in California, take a moment to look around your own garden, whatever form it takes. You never know what or who might grow there next. And if this story touched your heart even a little, go ahead and subscribe, give it a like, and share it with someone who could use a reminder that life still has gentle surprises waiting. Because sometimes all it takes is one summer, one helping hand, and one shared afternoon in the garden to change everything.